How about this coming up now for an opening keynote speaker, by the way? A man who is highly skilled in sales and marketing and sales management and business planning, who moved into IT early in his career after studying his business administration at universities across Europe. He joined Apple in the early 1990s and then joined Microsoft in 1995. Initially, he worked as the general manager for them in Austria and Switzerland, but then took international roles as the COO in Western Europe, Germany, and the Middle East and Africa. And he ultimately took the lead in cultural transformation of Microsoft in the times of digital transformation, where he was known as one of Microsoft's 14 transformation leaders worldwide. Since the transfer of knowledge for Microsoft internally, as well as for all customers and partners, is to be regarded as a complete success in the digitized world, he's currently leading the development and implementation of Microsoft's new learning organization across Europe, the Middle East, and Africa, where he is the Chief Learning Officer. An absolute pleasure joining us from Europe this morning to discuss the future of learning in organizations. Would you please welcome Alexander Stüger.
Hello and good morning from my side. Hello, good morning all. And of course, a pleasure to be here with you today. Thanks, Michael, for the kind introduction. And before we somehow dive into the subject, let me rephrase or reframe a little bit to some of the remarks which Michael made, where I was coming from, and actually share some thoughts what brought me here before I said I want to go a little bit deeper on the overall subject of the future of learning in organizations. I got, as Michael mentioned, engaged relatively late in my career in transforming companies, and in that case, transforming Microsoft. And when you look into the essence of it, after Satya's arrival in 2013, when we are starting really to look what is needed to get us from a very successful but somewhat traditional company with very high expertise in having software contracts with leading companies around the world, for a somewhat from today's view limited set of opportunities which we can consult our customers to someone who is really able to support our customers in their transformation. There, of course, it's all centered finally around learning. And therefore, the quote which you find here on the right side, as a culture, we are moving from a group of people who know it all to a group of people who want to learn it all, as Satya put it, really got me hooked on this learning journey we are on now, and focusing, helping and going deeper on transforming company by really learning. When you would look into the results Microsoft could enjoy coming out of this transformation, as said, moving from a very successful, marching strong, still pretty well growing company to a leader on the cloud, one of the most robust metrics you might look into is the stock quote which we have, which somehow, when you compare it to the first decade of the century, grew by factor 10. So it really shows transformation matters and, of course, can drive companies forward. So reflecting on this briefly, I think the title, would be more around, is there any future of an organization without learning? And why they did so, I want to explore a little bit three topics with you. The first is around what is really the profound technical change behind all this. Second, how does it impact our roles? How does it impact people's life in their jobs? And finally, share some experiences Microsoft had on that journey. And I think we can move to the next slide, please. So what we have here, and I think you all have seen several of those slides about change, which is driven, and what are the key numbers behind it. I just picked a few to make it a little more easy to digest. But could you imagine that somewhat in 2000, only 6% of world's population have been connected with the internet? Then when you would look into the enormous amount of data which generated each and every day, when you look into this 2.5 quintillion bytes, I don't even know how many zeros this would carry, there we also got some good impression on how many big data are stored somewhere. And of course, if you link this then with the connectivity, with the internet now up for sure significantly at 60%, the real fun starts if you link some artificial intelligence to it, which then of course generates new businesses like what is called here out of the huge market for cyber security of 6 trillion in 2021. So all big change. What it also means, of course, that a lot of startup companies, those in the know, have been founded and are very successful with stellar growth in the last 20 years. And of course, when you move more to the right side of the slide, it drives some profound opportunities, but to be perfectly honest, also fear with a lot of leaders. Because in a way, 80% of CEOs think that their business is at risk being attacked by newcomers, people who know more actually about how to leverage these mighty new technologies. There's also a big worry around how innovative companies are, and only 1/3 of CEOs have confidence that they are on par with the needs which they will have to drive further innovation. So these are very profound trends, and if you would look now into the next slide quickly, we would realize also that there was another accelerator which we all would not have welcomed, but it had profound impact when you think about the COVID pandemic, which in a way drove digital transformation progress within 12 months, which would normally happen with 2 to 3 years, which also, of course, led to the fact that acceleration was around the globe. We all, of course, especially when you are engaged, as you all are, in learning and providing learning to customers, to partners, to governments, everything moved to virtual. Big efforts, which, of course, also helped to leverage the new technology opportunities which have been there. So next, please. So in a way, we can say that technology coupled with capable people can solve our most important problems. It's not a guarantee for that, because of course it needs a lot of other factors chiming in. And what capable people are, we might entertain now, looking forward and go a little deeper in the presentation. Now with the next slide, let us briefly look into what are the profound trends which you are also aware of, and let me just comment on some of the themes which have arisen more recently. I think we all know there is enough capacity and enough intelligent cloud out in the markets around the world. What are new trends there is, of course, we have seen that more and more local data centers are founded by key cloud provider. And this is mainly driven, of course, by the need to have data stored locally, to also comply with local laws, to extend this intelligent cloud to governments. So there is a lot of movement going on there, but in a way, the capacity for the intelligent cloud as a central entity is more or less reaching its limits. So what is chiming in and becomes more and more important, and we might go to the next slide, is then that we see there that there are a lot of developments are happening at the edge. So the edge meaning that there are more and more intelligent devices are coming out there. And we all know, for example, products like HoloLens giving much more capability. And this is so important that the intelligence is where the user is, where the creator sits, because it, of course, makes us much more agile, allow people to really innovate faster. So this is one trend. And then you might extend this picture even by the user or by the creator. Because one of the strongest trends which we see currently is that there will be much more entitlement and power going back to the creators of solutions with technologies like Power Platform, where the IT knowledge you need is somewhat limited. If you just understand the overall concept, if you have some tech intensity in your life, you can start really developing the solution without having deep technology and development knowledge. And to have somehow the user, the creator, to give the power into the hands of them is one of the trends, of course, which also extends our reach. Whom do we need to skill? Whom do we want to get into our training so that we can really support them and their companies and governments with the right attempts and content on learnings. If we then would move on very briefly, what does this mean to the next slide, where we see what is the impact on companies? And you also can, of course, use the same model for governments by just changing some of the nomenclature here. So, but of course, it's all about the first step with digital transformation. You can empower employees, and empowering employees means also some of those new trends and new ways how you can look into things is to really democratize data. The old models where we had dashboards with very limited data, tailor-made to each function, limited, of course, the opportunity for people to really bring their best knowledge into it by just having access to democratized data, to find solutions, to add their own artificial intelligence department by department. So it's one of those key themes, empower employees to get all talents productive. Of course, it needs broad skilling. Second is around engaging customers. Of course, we can engage customers now in very new ways, and we all know these base models. That whatever we are doing now in ordering and getting into on websites or whatever systems in contact with a vendor, we get very tailor-made solutions. We get limited visibility on other offers in a way, so it's not all positive and still a little bit in this infancy. But of course, engaging customers in this true sense that you can tailor-made solutions for them, that you can learn with them, that they're integrated in the design process, of course, all possible and already state of the art with many companies. And finally, you have also this big opportunity where in this connected world with having so many intelligence tools available, how do you optimize operations? You can pick where you have core competencies, you can skip where you're not an expert one. And it also helps in a way to deal with some of the new challenges we have. If worldwide centralization doesn't work too well, where we had some examples during the pandemic now, also it's of course a very big opportunity to link large and small entities, just tailor-made to optimize operations. It's called out here. And finally, we are all aware of the power this digital transformation have to transform products. Standard examples might be things like that you have predictive maintenance offers pretty standard for many manufacturers, that you go where the challenge arises before it happens. Or another striking example is the big shifts which are happening in the insurance business, for example, where you quote and have tailor-made insurance contracts after the impact happened. And there has been a very new field just being built on things like that you can analyze very quickly, and then it can tailor off, and you can be super fast in delivering it to the different customers which you have. Just some examples, so pretty mighty. On the next slide now, we can look a little bit into what this means actually, and what is our take, what is Microsoft's take there. And you all hopefully have heard Satya talking about tech intensity, and it was also in the slide which we have seen before in the introduction. What does tech intensity mean? It means, in essence, whatever creativity, capability you have in your company to really fully seize the opportunity you might have through digital transformation, you need to up your game on technical knowledge. And only you have this capability that most of your people in the right level are educated well about the opportunities the new technologies brings, then you finally are able to solve some of the issues we have seen before, to be innovative, to be one of the companies leading, accelerating, instead falling behind. And the other thought here is any company, of course, needs really to build their own proprietary digital capability. And we see a lot of insourcing of IT key functions in the last years confirming that. Then when you would look into a little bit deeper, how does it impact our IT departments? Because in a way we are pretty much engaged, especially skilling technology experts. And this just gives you some rough overview where this has shifted to. When you look into the past, and past is here only 7, 8, 9 years back, so we are not talking 30 years. So of course you have seen with the rise of the cloud a lot of demand for cybersecurity, digital innovation, very different views on between the US and worldwide here, by the way. Of course, companies really had a big effort to get strong software development going, to build this proprietary knowledge which they needed. And then you see relatively low in the ranks and not even really making those tables on a worldwide level, artificial intelligence, data analytics. If then it would move over to the far right, I think one of the first key observations here is software development isn't there anymore. And it's a way it confirms this, that the power goes to the creator. So as said, new platforms like Power Platform allowing this. For us in the learning business, it also means, of course, that we really have to get a broad skilling approach to a lot of audiences in governments, in companies, to allow to enjoy the benefits. And then really being able to drive digital innovation, data analytics, as it's called out as the top priorities now. If we now move on to the next slide, we can have some look there. What does it mean to our jobs? How is our life changing, or the life of our customers and our students, which we all have? I think one of the obvious observations is that the half-life of a learned skill is now below 5 years. So this theme, which is widespread around lifelong learning, has become extremely important. Then, of course, it also is impacting how jobs are constantly changing. So the years where you could somehow bet on to have some knowledge and stay in a job for a long, long time, this is gone for more or less all different industries and businesses. So it's now around 4.5 years where on average jobs are really changed in their content, and also how they are comprised and how they are linked to each other. And finally, I think the far right is a pretty interesting one, because fortunately, we're all getting older, but also working lives getting longer. So most of the younger generation now will have careers which spans over 50 years, which also takes us this extremely important topic for lifelong learning and what it brings with it as opportunities. I think one of the basic thoughts, of course, also there is learning is not always easy. So, and it changes with the ages you are growing through, what are capabilities, what are preferred techniques. So the offer which is needed to really serve this wide audience, of course, is a very, very rich one with very tailor-made opportunities for different learners. So also some big market opportunity for all of us. When we then would look into the next slide, we can have here some short press pause about what I was trying to talk to up to now. The one theme is around, we all, I think, understand the mightiness of digital transformation, that it needs tech intensity to really enjoy the benefits. It is driving this immense drive and need for new skills requirements, the business which we are in, and which, of course, has an endless growing demand. And finally, to land this all in the center of it, as I said, learning is not always easy. We really have to take care. How do we help our governments, customers, each individual actually? How do we really generate and drive a learning culture? And now let me move on when we look into the next slide and talk a little bit about the experiences we had to bring the mission of Microsoft, which Satya framed as empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. How did we support this with learning efforts? And when you just look into these words, to achieve more, of course, requires learning for each and every one. And therefore, as said, learning is so much in the core of also Microsoft transformation. How do we think now at the next slide about what is needed and where we are focused on? And when you quickly look into this slide, you might even say Microsoft continues to invest in skilling is a pretty underweighted statement, because actually our investments in skilling have been grown substantially over the last 5 years. I think factor 3 might be a fair number here. What we need, it takes for us, and the impact which we also want and need to be followed in the markets is, first of all, it's all about skilling our own employees. And this was, of course, a big change for many of us, because there also the key themes are how do we increase tech intensity for all our people, but we also had this significant demand from all our customers. How can our people get better to consult customers on the transformation journey? So it needed a lot of new soft skills, industry skills, and of course, it's a never-ending story. With it, it came also that the learning hours Microsoft people needed to dedicate to learn, to be educated, they were really tripling more or less also over the last 5 years. And of course, we had very strong learning on that way. How can we really get to a good grip on at what state our employees are? How can we offer them a faster impact of the learnings which they are doing? So also a very, very rich learning experience which we got there. So this is more the focus on our employees. Then, of course, we also had significant demand from our customers and partners to get trainings from us to help them understand the mightiness. And there we are more or less entirely focused at Microsoft, at least in the last 2 years, about bringing technical skilling around cloud technologies, and they're mostly focused around Azure to our customers and partners. By the way, this is also a very rich opportunity for all of us to partner with strong learning partners, because a part of the overall skilling which a customer needs compared to the offer we have, we might be able to cover 10 to 15%. And then it really needs richness to help customers to get to skilling plans which they need to really seize the overall opportunity which the cloud has. The third angle which came in then very pronounced, also linked to the pandemic which we have been facing, is getting engaged on skilling future generations. Because, of course, we all understood with the acceleration of digital transformation, it needed for wide audiences to get more engaged on technology skilling, get at least in touch of it, and also helping them to get employed again, so increasing employability for many, many people. It also has a very high impact on countries where new data centers are built, for example, because there the knowledge also needs to be driven across all audiences. Just to give you some numbers on the impact we had, for example, in the last 12 months, finally, at least we were able in the future generation motion, which should give us a good base to build skilling businesses on it. We were reaching up to now in the last 12 months around 30 million of people. When we look into customer and partners, we have skilled somehow in this relatively narrow angle on technical people on Azure skilled jointly with you, because a lot of you are deeply engaged in this. We could skill around 1 million learners at customers and partners. So pretty impactful, I would call it. Moving on now to the next slide. How does this land all, and what is really the intent behind? One of the key intents behind is, which is true for all 3 dimensions which I showed you, this passion for uncover the latest technologies and really imagine new ways how you can use it for the things which you want to drive forward in your company. Second is to learn these new skills. And I think there we are jointly with you all. We are on this constant crusade. How can we build opportunities that people can learn at their own terms, that they can get the skills they need and the learning opportunities which fits to their personalities. And finally, what have been raised in importance is to prove the skills through certification programs, because when we think about also topics around employability, sharing 50 years lasting careers, to be able to prove what you have learned has been never as important as it is today. The next slide now will also give some hints how we at Microsoft are trying to help to build some base layer for skilling, because of course especially also for technical roles. It needs some standardization of roles, which we are talking about. It is really a quite serious work to develop the right learning paths so that people know what is the course forward, how they can develop in certain jobs. And then, of course, as already mentioned, we have been trying to really build some rich offer around self-based learning, about training events, instructor-led trainings and certifications, just to serve different styles, needs and opportunities depending on the depth of learning which is required. In the next slide, we will again see somehow the overall offers which are out there. And the key message of the slide is mainly, it is a rich set. It goes from beginners, when you look into things like Global Skills Initiative, when you see the richness in MS Learn, which actually serves very different profiles, also some with significant knowledge already. But it also is important to look into artificial intelligence, business schools, for example, things we are not delivering by ourselves, as we are so much focused on this angle of technical education for technical people, that I think this slide also tells us as a group of companies, of individuals interested in learning, how much we can achieve if we blend the right topics and themes and bring it to our customers in the right location, in the right style, with the right language. So in a way, this slide is also an invitation, how can we cooperate even more to drive this big mission which we jointly have forward. Now let's move with the next slide a little bit to the final part, which is also so important, and I was referring to it several times. I think one is this theme around culture. And the word which stands out when I go back to my favorite basic slide, it's this word around people who want to learn it all. Because we all have the experience, we know learning is not always easy. It's hard work, it requires dedication. And therefore, let me share some of the experiences we had when we look to the next slide. And there, what is visible there is some of our key learnings, experiences, not only about learning culture, but culture in general, which helped us at least to change our company in a very profound way. And of course, it's evident to drive a learning culture is not the charter of the HR department or some learning departments we might have. It really has to come from the top. And I personally think the most important point here is number 3. We must be able somehow for our companies, for our people, for our government, societies, or whatever angle we are taking. It needs a purpose-driven mission. So people need to understand the why. Because if this is clear, there is little debate what time is needed somehow to really to be dedicated on it. Another very strong one is to make symbolic and changes, big and small. An example for this might be it really needs dedicated learner time, which is committed to people, which is cut out on their schedules. This is a very clear sign that we are taking it important that it happens. I think it's also important when you look into number 8, for example, are we able to keep score? Do we have the right measurements which are needed to support this learning culture? And do we have, again, do the symbolic changes, do we have enough celebrations? And scores might be, if you think about those concepts like most have, there's a part of mandatory learning, there's another part of learning which people can choose from. The higher, of course, or the more time invest on the second part of individual chosen learning, of course, the better your learning culture is landed with people. So I think these are just some of those remarks which are extremely important if we want to drive a learning culture, which is a prerequisite for this world lifelong effort which we all want to take. If we then would look into the final slide, I think, which is there, it just gives some angle and some concrete examples. I hope it has become clear during this short presentation that finally digital transformation is about people. We are able to really democratize the mightiness of data, the mightiness of digital transformation, the mightiness of the edge of cloud computing, by having all our people included in this education process according to their level. A certain kind of tech intensity and concept knowledge will be paramount for anyone to succeed in government companies or to have really impact. And as I said, there are really strong signs needed, which we need to consult our companies in, the companies which we are working for in, to get it really rolling so that everyone has a tailor-made skilling plan to join this journey. I hope during this short speech I have convinced you that we have a real widespread and great mission to follow jointly. And I think it will be also very important when we want to go that through, that we also for ourselves, we sign up to this constant learning. We are very adaptable and quick with our business models to follow the opportunity. And finally, it needs a lot of stellar collaboration amongst us to seize this big opportunity. With that, thanks for listening, and back to Michael, and also looking forward to some questions you might have about the topics which I touched on. Thanks very much.
Lovely. Thank you very much indeed. Alexander, what an outstanding presentation, sir. I sat there absolutely glued to it, and your slides as well. Some amazing content. And let me just echo what you were saying as well. If you do have questions, ladies and gentlemen, watching from wherever you are in the world, please go across to the main speaker lounge and type in your question there as well. I've got questions for you that I'm keen to ask you as well, Alexander, if I may. But all of our delegates are welcome to ask you during this live Q&A session, whatever it is that you like. We're having people monitor that for you, so those questions can be fed straight through to myself. So please go into the speaker lounge if you want to ask Alexander anything specific right now. And we've got a few moments to the top of the hour, about 12 minutes to go through Q&A with you. We're going to stick very closely to our agenda time slots, ladies and gentlemen. So we will be breaking literally, as the agenda says, in the next 12 minutes time as well. But Alexander, I mean, what an amazing, outstanding presentation. One of the things you said was that massive digital transformation was driven by the pandemic. So there was something good that came out of this damned COVID thing, wasn't there, at the end of the day? It was fantastic.
Yeah, of course it is. If you would just think a decade back, what it would have meant to a lot of companies if the technology would not have progressed so far. Because when you look also how many economies are recovering already relatively quickly, because they didn't have this harsh shutdown, because there have been all this technology mainly around enabling people to go to home office, to work much more virtual, to also start changing their culture. So I think this was some of the positive accelerations which are happening there. And if we are now capable in the next step to really link these new experiences with all the richness of physical contact, I think we are really able to leverage the opportunities technology has much, much better. So there is a small positive in this tragedy which happened to many people.
One of the growth areas were, the sheer volume of digital transformation. I think we're going to generate something like 264 zettabytes of data this year. But when you think about digital transformation, I'll be talking about this tomorrow during my own session. We'll do well over 264 zettabytes every day, not in a year, by 2025. So the pace of where digital is taking us is phenomenal. But you mentioned future business stages, and you had that wonderful slide with a comparison of worldwide versus what was going on in the US. One of the questions that I wanted to ask you about that is that, when you look at the growth of future business stages as you presented, you looked at worldwide in the US, but what about China and Russia for that matter as well? And are we, you didn't mention security at all, but is that a pressing issue for us as well as learning?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think many of you might have heard this announcement today that US is planning, and there's little doubt that it will go through, that they will invest another 250 billion into the development of technology to really be able to also stay in the race with China. So it's, I think, a clear wake-up call for many of us. And I would also say, especially in other areas of the world like Europe, to be aware what is really needed to stay the course, to really leverage and also benefit from a lot of those movements. We have, of course, also great startups in Europe and a lot of smaller companies which are successful. But I think this is another very, very important thing to focus on. What are the overall investments? So I think this is something which will drive also the learning. If I refer to the enormous amounts of data which you have been referring to, I was trying to give some hints there that this democratizing this is very important to make it really useful. So to have more and more intelligence at the edge of the cloud, but also to give individuals much more access to this data to make their own opportunities and sense out of it, because otherwise a lot of those data will not really be used in a way. So big opportunity again for many startups, large companies. The security challenge, of course, is there across all angles of that, and especially I think also the last 12 months on the challenges driven by the pandemic also showed some of the limits that when people were overly ambitious to develop whatever application, a lot of them have been taken down and needed to be taken down around because of privacy and security challenges. So to really understand how you develop applications with built-in security and privacy, I think is another very, very important thing, of course. And it's a big market.
Fabulous.
I had it on my slide. I did 6 trillion. What is expected this year?
It's huge. And as you've also mentioned, digital transformation in its own right is very disruptive by its nature. And whilst it generates opportunities, on one hand, it also, on the other hand, generates fear for many leaders of organizations and people generally. How do you mitigate the opportunities with the fear, Alexander?
Yeah, well, I think we as a company try to support, and of course with many partners, because Microsoft has always a model which only scales if we get more knowledge and more specific knowledge in driven by including a lot of partner knowledge in our efforts. It's really about how can you educate, how can we democratize, because I think this is a very important thought when you think about getting heavy technology also to business decision makers, steps, and make it tangible for many more people. For example, what you can do with Power Platform, or how new developments like Microsoft Viva help you to get the knowledge to the right space at the right time. I think these are themes which will show, and you always have to show it. So I think it's not about talking theoretical concepts. So taking the fear down by just showing what is possible. I think the other theme, of course, is we have been in a way soaked into, because we have been a pretty hardcore technology company. But this really rallying cry amongst customers, tell us what we should do with this. Of course, this also built the need for us to get much more industry specific, and also to be much more able to help people to find missions based on technology. So, and there, of course, as I mentioned, it also needs strong partnership with other companies, because there is no way around. And of course, I would also underscore that, especially in parts of the economy, mid-sized companies, there you might see more fear than hope currently.
So you might say at one level that the journey of 1 billion bytes starts with the first click, to modify an old-fashioned Chinese phrase. You've got to get into this at some level where you're step by step as well, haven't you, if there is fear that manifests itself in that kind of scenario?
You're right. I think there's one of this one fascinating slide which I want to show us. if you don't know the future, you better invent it by yourself. And I think this is something where the somehow consultancy would be really serious to try to spend some time on where do I see myself, my company, my citizens in 5 to 10 years from now. And if you don't find some good answers to it, you are in real trouble. And I think
Wow.
this is something, of course, which requires some joint efforts.
Thank you. Great insight there. And as a final question, sir, obviously you've been talking about Microsoft's strategies to support customers better, to get out there and seize the opportunities of digital transformation. Could you talk a little bit more as we close about the role you see with the LLPA in this?
Yeah. First of all, a big thank you to the great partnership we have with a lot of entities of LLPA. And I hope you also got some sense how much opportunity we jointly have. And it said we are just have a relatively narrow angle on that skilling, very much around technology. We don't scale well, for example, on languages. In these wide geographies, it's also important to have geography presence. So I think we have developed great partnership in some countries where we are really looking at what is needed in a given country. I think we have huge opportunities as there are so many new data centers built out. How do we join forces to really seize these opportunities? So it's just continue, increase how we are talking, not only on a deliver trainings, which we have to get more engaged geography by geography on a more strategic level. And then I think we will find a lot of even better opportunities to cooperate.
Superb. And it remains for me, Alexander, to thank you on behalf of everyone behind the scenes here at our C3 Cloud Global Skills V-Tour. I mean, if your presentation, sir, is the definitive opener for setting the standard for what lies ahead for 2 days, wow, there's an awful lot of good stuff coming. I applaud you on behalf of all of our delegates and everybody involved. Alexander, thank you so much, sir. Absolutely brilliant. I was glued to the screen. So thank you enormously on behalf of everyone. And
Thank
have
you
a
much,
good day
Michael.
watching.
Thanks all for listening. Thanks very much.